I didn't roll my eyes, say anything inappropriate, or voice any complaints. Instead, I was simply silent as they played their games, and I gazed out the window at the sunset. Chuckled at internal jokes that I didn't participate in. It was the yearly summer vacation on the 12th of. We were packed into 2 vans and traveling to the shore. I had prepared the munchies. Even after I loaded the luggage and offered the front seat, they continued to make fun of me. Stop being so sensitive and lighten up, it's only a joke. You're always so aloof. They pulled over at a rest area in the middle of nowhere on the 4th day, and I walked inside to use the restroom when I arrived. I initially believed that the vehicles had just moved for parking because they were no longer there. Perhaps someone had an errand to run, but then I discovered a note in my sister's handwriting attached to the bench. I looked around, and my chest went hollow. Let's see if she can figure this one out. I hoped and prayed that they hadn't actually abandoned me, but they had. The laughter I knew had followed them as they drove was what most disturbed me, not the desert or the quiet. Riley is my name, and even though I did nothing wrong, they abandoned me as though I was too much to bear. But before I tell the rest of my story, I'd like to. I'm aware that you're here with me. Tell me or leave a brief comment. Where you're viewing from. If you find this story meaningful, please click. Thank you for subscribing, it lets the algorithm know I'm not alone. Now, let me tell you. If someone had asked me to sum up my life at age 27, I would have likely claimed that it was like having wallpaper in a room that no one could see anymore. I lived in the same little Utah town where I was locked in a cycle as a child and worked the counter at a greeting regulars and giving out allergy medications at the neighborhood drugstore, who seldom ever looked me in the eye until when they knew me from the TikTok that went viral, the one in which my half-sister Bailey appeared. I was dubbed the family loser with my flawless makeup and lighting, and I received thousands of. Home wasn't any better. My mom, Marcia, and I shared a roof. Bailey, Marcia's second kid and the love of her life, and stepfather Clayton. Clayton operated a car dealership like he owned the town in their collective mind, and he regarded me like his in-house maid Marcia, who came and went from his residence. Her brief performances in which she would abruptly go to bed and sigh. And let me handle everything, including the laundry, groceries, meals, etc. Occasionally, she would come out long enough to inform me that I was exacerbating the situation by. Bailey didn't do anything to disturb the home's energy, she didn't have to. Her life was crafted through inspirational prank videos and makeup tutorials on the internet. Phrases from Pinterest, and she had gained a following in the process. Naturally, I was frequently the joke, such as when she recorded me cleaning the bathroom floor and captioned it, "When you raise a." The responses have included everything from amusing emoticons to strangers diagnosing me with depression from a single clip. If Marca had stood up for me and urged Bailey to stop, it would have been one thing. She stated stuff like, "Bailey is only trying to express herself," or "Why do you always create? Janelle, why is everything so dramatic?" She pretended that maintaining harmony required denying my sentiments. The only thing keeping this brittle house of cards together was my silence. I so continued to fold myself smaller and smaller in the hopes that one day one night after cleaning, I would completely vanish and someone would at last miss me. I ended up organizing a drawer in the hallway cabinet for the 3rd time that day in the kitchen. It was primarily old, broken pens and receipts, however there was a picture hidden between some envelopes. Bent at the corners and faded at the edges, it was my real dad. He had warm. In the picture, he was kneeling in the grass with weary eyes and a soft grin. A small kid with wavy brown hair and bruised knees had an arm wrapped protectively over her. I hadn't seen that picture in perhaps for years. It was like discovering a ghost I was unaware of. I flipped it over in search of it and froze when I read the weak handwriting on the words that came back to me were, "Don't let her end up like him." The words were like a fist to my chest. Who did she mean? What did that even mean? I stared at those 7 words, thinking he was a failure, a disappointment, and a warning. After what seemed like an hour, I put the picture in a book on my nightstand the following morning without telling anyone. Discovered it, I carried that sentence's weight into the next week. Then, at dinner, Clayton made the momentous revelation, He sliced his steak and stated, "We're going camping with the family," as if the issue was 3 days in the Sawtooth Mountains, already settled, without phones or other interruptions. Bailey wrinkled her nose, and we were the only ones repairing it. Do we have to sleep in? Tents similar to real tents, Clayton's persona is developed via survival. And you'll get plenty of content for your channel, he said with a smug smile. Bailey was all in all of a sudden, and I should have said no, as my instincts warned me. This was about controlling a performance, not about bonding. The way Clayton smiled as if he were 5 steps ahead of everyone else in the room was a sight I had previously seen in his eyes. However, Marka interrupted me as I was about to say, "Don't be selfish. Bailey wants this. We need to go as a family," she remarked, referring to Janelle. I nodded when I heard the word family fall like a trap slamming shut. Always did, but I convinced myself it was only 3 since my shame overcame my gut. I had lived in that house for 27 years. What was another weekend? The night prior to our departure, I stood in my bedroom and gazed at the picture of my father leaning on my bedside lamp. I stroked my touch over the walls to see the lengthy shadows created by the beautiful, golden light over the picture's edge, following the contour of his smile and my tiny shoulders beneath his arm, and I muttered, "I'm hardly permitted if I end up." I didn't realize it yet, but that camping would not be the worst thing if I liked him. The trip would be the turning point in my life, the final time I would ever call that house home, and the first time I would begin wondering what it would be like to fit in somewhere else. Against the azure Idaho sky, Sawtooth Mountains rose in ragged lines. They reminded me of a painting that would be displayed in a dentist's office. They were both stunning and icy. Office lovely, certain, yet aloof, mute, and distanced witnesses to something much more unsightly than the scenery would indicate. The SUV journey up felt claustrophobic. For her TikTok live stream, Bailey had taken the front seat, sitting like a queen and holding her phone aloft. She described the journey using her typical phony optimism. "Let's go on a road trip with the family. Check to see if my sister can survive in the woods without Wi-Fi." Her fans sent. I could hear the pings with every like in the meantime, along with flames and laughing emojis. Unseen and unsaid to it, I sat behind her, wedged between 2 duffel bags. Clayton drove like he was on a mission, and it felt like a ghost in my own household. As he spoke about family structure and resilience, he held the wheel in one hand and made gestures with the other. Utilized the voice he reserved for motivating speeches at the dealership and coerced my mother into keeping quiet. Marcia sat next to him, grinning as if she were trying to forge a fragile peace agreement. Light talk, but she kept her eyes away from me the whole time we were riding. When we unintentionally crossed paths in the rearview mirror, she quickly turned away as if I had burned her. By the time we pulled into the dirt clearing close to the trailhead, I could already sense something wasn't right but couldn't yet identify it. The trees were tall and foul, like ruined milk in my stomach. Unconcerned, and the mountains seemed to be waiting for something to shatter. With her phone still recording and whirling wildly, Bailey rushed out of the SUV, showcasing the breathtaking beauty of the wilderness. Detox #camping queen as usual, I stayed behind and took out my equipment. Before the tent was even taken out of the suitcase, my arms were already hurting. It didn't take long for everything to come together, Clayton yelling commands, Marka providing phony support, Bailey filming, and smirking. I pitched both tents with Bailey's assistance as he recorded a hilarious. She received a sketch about her loser sister, who most likely lacks the ability to start a fire. I ended up with a knot in my throat and dirt under my nails because of the content she requested. Bailey was live again, swooping in on my hunched back as I stirred chili over the campfire and stated, "Here's." I turned to our chef/mule, which offers 5-star forest service. A little and said, "Could you not just say those 3 even, low words?" Clayton paused the spoon halfway to his mouth after catching it. "This excursion is to." Slowly, almost carefully, he replied, "Test us. Some will pass, some he smirking, "We'll see you after dinner and after more embarrassing live streams." We sat by the fire, or more accurately, they sat as I washed and rinsing out a saucepan. "We need more wood," so Janelle collected some as Clayton stood and stretched. "There's a." I was staring at him alone when it was dark 15 minutes ago, and his eyes contracted. I looked to Marka for support, but she glanced down at her lap and said, "Let's see if you can do at least that right." Said nothing, so I went and just got a flashlight without arguing or begging. I entered the tree, rubbing my arms against the branches as I trekked through the brush. The wind murmured like it had a secret I didn't want to know, so I promised myself I would only be there for a maximum of 15 minutes. And when I returned, they would all still be giggling by the fire, but everything was gone from the campsite, including the stove and tents, not just the individuals. Even the blasted marshmallows and folding chairs were packed up in the SUV. Missing tire marks that vanish from a flat rock near the bottom of the gravel road. A folded piece of notebook paper and a Sharpie was placed in the fire pit. Said, "Let's see if she can survive a little wilderness adventure." As my flashlight flickered, I stood motionless, and then I noticed it next to the. It was Bailey's silver bracelet, the one with the small. My breath froze in my throat as she never removed the star charm. She knew she was complicit. This was not a test of character or a botched prank. Cold, heartless, and purposeful treachery. I took a seat on the wet ground there, still with the firewood eyed. Congregated for the first hour, I hoped they would return. Perhaps this was a sick joke, and they were waiting for me to lose it so they could laugh about it from the woods. But they didn't return, and after 2 hours, the woodland grew darker. I had just half a tent, no sleeping bag, and no water, so the cold seeped into my bones. With a dead flashlight and a heart that had finally broken irreparably, I curled up close to the spot where the fire had been. I tried to recall how to breathe while putting my arms about my knees. Played in my mind like a nasty slideshow about parents who fail to take out the garbage and are locked out of the house. Bailey threw my 6th grade sketchbook in the trash while I pretended to be sick so I couldn't attend the state art competition. It felt like I was the one being silenced each time I was pushed aside. Problem, and I voiced it aloud for the first time, if only to the trees. I'm not joking, I'm not their test. I'll never return. Above me, the wind rustled the branches as if it were listening, or perhaps as dawn finally answered, sweeping across the mountains in a pale yellow hue. I gently rose up, every bone stiff, and the jagged ridges looked like a polite apology from a sky that owed me nothing. Every muscle hurt, my shoes were stiff with dirt, and my stockings were wet from the dampness. And my throat was sore from thirst, yet instead of screaming or crying, I simply decided on a course and began to walk. Every stride was a silent protest that I didn't. I had no idea which road I was looking for or where the route led, but standing motionless would have meant giving up, and even after everything, despite the shame, betrayal, and intense loneliness my feet burned before the sun had completely passed the treetops, so I wrapped them in something I wasn't ready to give them. I rationed the stale granola bar I discovered and tore strips off the hem of my shirt. Chewing carefully and allowing each bite to linger like that at the bottom of my coat pocket. Possibly the last time I continued to walk. By lunchtime, the woods were starting to thin out. The earth flattened and the air heated up, and then, like a mirage, I noticed a section of. As I waited, I could see asphalt in the distance, a 2-lane highway that sliced through nowhere. Thumb out, nerves keen, I sat on the side of the road for what seemed like hours. A few cars went by. Eyes turned away too quickly, and then a dusty 18-wheeler slowed The driver leaned out his window as the engine hissed softly as it slammed onto the gravel shoulder brakes. With gentle eyes and gray stubble, he may have been in his mid-60s when he first examined me. Saying, "Are you all right, my love?" I shook my head after nodding, saying, "I need a ride to the closest town." He simply unlocked the door and remarked, without more inquiry, "Roy, if you don't mind country music, you can seat up front." I sat rigidly in the taxi as the air smelled of coffee and old leather. Roy didn't push me as I held my arms across my chest, not yet prepared to collapse. He chatted about the weather, the northern wildfires, and how much he detested the petrol costs in Idaho. I liked the cacophony. Reduced the feeling that I had been cut in two. He took me off at a petrol station outside a hardly existent town. One main road, one diner, one post office, and this dusty, lively spot. I borrowed the snack shelves and the adolescent clerk behind the counter who was half sleeping. Phone. I gazed at the thumb resting on the keyboard above the numbers I knew by heart. I didn't want to hear her voice, so I didn't press them for her number. Rather, I contacted a number that had been inactive for more than 10 years, one that was hidden in a forgotten part of my mind. Gone with everything. I shouldn't have remembered. The phone rang once. 2 times, then a familiar, low, gruff voice. I nearly choked. Robin. It's Janelle. After a little silence, I asked her where she was and gave her the name of the gas station. Then a fork in the road, she said without hesitation, I'll come. You're no longer theirs. As truck tires hummed by, they sat on the sidewalk outside and gazed at the ground. That line stuck in my head like an incantation, you're no longer theirs. Inside the gas, it was like a door opening somewhere I didn't know existed. The afternoon news was broadcast on a tiny TV that was mounted on the wall. The volume was. I could read the captions, albeit they were low. A local man reports his daughter missing in Sawtooth. Suspected mental health issues in the mountains. They were already changing the narrative. Clayton had gone to the police and said that I had fled and that I was unstable. Naturally, It wouldn't have sufficed if I had just stood there, mouth dry, staring at the television. They tried to portray me as damaged, dangerous, unstable, and a liability when they left me. Be ignored or dreaded. A group of hikers in their college years filtered into the. One of them, a man wearing a backward cap, looked at me while they were sweating and laughing. His forehead furrowed before his face brightened with recognition. Hold on, are you that TikTok loser sister? Talk. After staring at him for a while, I smiled, but he blinked. Perplexed, Roy shrugged and continued outside as the sun sank. Gone, but I remained on that curb until the distant headlights flickered and the sky turned lavender. Robin got out of the beaten-up Jeep Wrangler slowly, her boots crunching as she did so. Gravel. She looked older than I recalled, with silver-streaked hair, and she was dragged into a. Her face was worn, yet her eyes were as steady as stone despite her loose braid. She answered the door without giving me a hug or rushing to inquire about what had happened. You hungry? I said at the passenger door, nodding. The majority of the drive was silent, with no music or inquiries, but once I noticed her observing me in the side mirror, not out of sympathy but incredulity, but with a different kind of acknowledgement, like someone who had previously. I could still smell the smoke after walking through a fire, and for the first time I allowed myself to think that perhaps the pine-scented air in Oregon hadn't burned me too badly. The mountains in the distance didn't loom like saws, instead, they stood there, and I wasn't sure how to breathe it yet. Steady composure, as though they had no desire to put me to the test, as though they. Perhaps, just beyond Bend, Robin's cabin would allow me to live in peace. It was a tiny, winding creek that was flanked by lodgepole pine rows and murmured more than it hurried. In some spots and had a subtle scent of old books and cedar smoke, which she named. Despite lacking air conditioning, the breeze coming through the screen door of her escape pod made the entire space feel like it's letting you out inside shelves that are buckling from the weight of books and field instructions. In the corner was a cast iron stove that was still warm from two. When I entered, Robin handed me the ancient cat's pickle and moss, who hardly looked up. A blanket, placed a broken mug of chamomile tea before me, and uttered. If the cats are snoring, don't take it. The couch is in the bathroom on the left. She didn't ask me to describe what transpired that evening, so I just stared at the old pine ceiling and heard the house's streams relaxing. I reflected of Utah and the oppressive quiet. Bailey's ability to chuckle through harshness like it was money over our dinner table, but mostly I considered how. The following morning, Robin slipped a piece of paper over the breakfast table, a list of nearby employers, nothing fancy, just Scrawled phone numbers and names. This ain't a spa, she remarked while drinking her coffee. I began at a nearby co-op on the outskirts of town, and work heals more than pity. Town selling handcrafted soaps and quinoa to retired people and sunburned hikers. Lecturers who brought their own jars. The job was peaceful and honest, nobody swore orders when I talked, nobody rolled their eyes. Cynthia, the manager, grinned with. I met Travis Cole there, and he adjusted the delivery truck's broad. Her entire face. His voice was like old flannel, his shoulders were quiet, and he always uttered my name like. Morning Janelle Harper. It was important. Not sweetheart or. Just my full name, as if he were re-establishing my connection to the outside world.